We can't hear anything, by the way.
I think everybody is on mute, Kevin.
.3:30 and I'm here.
I think this is number 5, maybe 6. This is number 5, maybe 6.
We're here ready to bargain.
I'm not getting invitations to send. You let them in? Okay. Yeah, I didn't see anything pop up. Usually I do. Good afternoon. We're here at Polk Education Association 2021 negotiations number 6. It's September 2nd, 2020. We have a number of folks here in the Jim Miles Professional Development Center, and then the remainder of our participants are virtual. Ms. Porteous. And this is live Facebook. The meeting is being recorded by the district, and also it is being broadcast live on YouTube by the Polk Education Association.
Speakers.
All right, good afternoon. So on Monday afternoon, Mrs. Yocum and PEA sent us the remaining items at my request because we were still waiting for those items after Wednesday's meeting. So there are a number of things.
We can't hear you, Tedra.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So as I said earlier, we received this on Monday afternoon. So we received your additional items upon my request in terms of things that we needed to continue to discuss. And so based on that, my team and I have not been able to review these items in detail. And I know that, I guess, just recently you sent the salary proposals as well. Yeah. And so, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up the MOU and then see what we can get done, and then we can go from there. So if you want to go ahead and go through everything, we can.
Stuff was, I just had unmute. A lot of the things that I sent you were things that we had discussed at the table. For the most part, there was a few things at the end, but I know Linda was going to get back to you on a few of the pieces. So going back to number 6 under the safety protocols, the symptom screening and awareness, we wanted to move the employee screening procedure there. And then I had read out loud the language that I'd sent you in the email, and that you had said that Linda King was going to get back with you on a few pieces. And we are still of the mind here that if you're sending an employee home because they have to quarantine or that they've been exposed and you're directing them to stay home, they shouldn't be using their own sick leave. It should either be a TDA because they can still work from home because they're maybe not sick, but they need to quarantine for whatever reason the Mark Wilcox Center has said or the Department of Health has said. Or they should be either using the 10 days of COVID leave or they should be on a TDA or paid admin leave. Again, you can't direct somebody to stay home and then tell them they have to use their own sick time. And so I know you were talking to Linda about that piece. And I had sent over the language in the email to you that I had read out loud at the table last Wednesday. So I figured we could start there because I think that was one of the only pieces left in the safety and protocols that we need to revisit before we can pretty much after that, I think we're pretty close.
So I did discuss this with Linda. The way it essentially happens is if you are sent home, one, and you can work from home, that's the first thing. So you obviously get your work from home option. And so that is essentially a TDA. What we're doing is creating a new code in the system as well so that we can track everyone that goes home either with an exposure or a positive. So we can be able to report that to back to the state and to the health department as well in terms of our own operational costs. So that does occur. The other thing, though, is if you cannot work from home, I think that was a question that you had as well. If you can't work from home, what do you do? And so in that case, that's when the 10 days from FFCRA kicks in. And then at that point, any additional leave that you need to be on after your 10 days are exhausted would then kick in. And so remember, when we send you home, and if you can work from home, then obviously you're not using your sick leave or anything at that time. You're just using a TDA. So it is essentially like you being here at Jim Miles. And until that code is completed, what we're actually doing is coding everybody for PD, right? Just because we know that no PD is going on during the semester. And if it is, it's pretty much all virtual. So we're using that code to make sure that we identify those employees that are working from home. But then even more so after that, if they are truly sick and cannot do the e-learning or whatever the work from home assignment is at that time, then they do get to use the FFCRA and the 10 days there. And then at that point, that's when their sick leave would kick in.
Well, I think still from our side, after the emergency sick leave from the CARES Act is utilized, that if this keeps happening, so if they're directed to stay home multiple times and that 10 days is exhausted, you're still directing an employee to stay home, and hopefully they can work from home. But we know that there are positions that can't. And if they're being directed to stay home, then we still feel that that should be on you guys, whether they're getting a test or they're getting a doctor's note or whatever, that should still be on you guys, because we also don't want to run into the issue of people not reporting symptoms or an exposure because they're out of leave and they can't afford to be not paid.
So,
And that was the discussion stopped, or kind of ended up last week, and you had said that you would get back with Linda.
right. So I think the only thing that we could offer in terms of, you're right. I guess there are two existing protocols, if that makes sense. So the first would be if you are directed to stay home by a healthcare provider or even the Department of Health. So in that case, yes, we would, if you can work from home, that would be your first available option, is working from home, and trying to save as many sick leave days as you can. And then the second option is one or two, if you are, and let me back up. The second option would be to use some sort of FFCRA, but then after you've used your FFCRA, what other available leave do you have? I thought we settled on, and maybe I'm mistaken, you won't be disciplined for being that's where we won't discipline, and we agreed to not discipline employees for being in unpaid sick time during their COVID-related absence. But you can't be on, period.
So I guess the issue, though, and we did have that conversation. We were talking through some of those scenarios about the what ifs, but still, at the end of the day, if the district is saying you cannot come to work, you are a safety risk essentially to the operation of our schools, then they should not even have to use their sick time. And because, yes, they do have the 10 days, hopefully they only have to use that one 10-day period, if they can't do the TDA. But if this is happening multiple times, and it's already happening now in schools, I mean, if they have multiple instances of exposure, then you're essentially penalizing an employee because they're trying to do the right thing and not spread this in our school. And so that's what we want to avoid. And so the conversation last week was talking about, if they did go into an unpaid leave, but we're still in the position that if they're directed to stay home, you can't direct an employee to use their own accrued leave to compensate that.
Because Tedra, I spoke because I stand the chance of being exposed multiple times because I go into multiple locations.
I remember that. Let me get some clarification.
So Mike was saying that he was going to take a look at something, was what I recall.
Yep. Let me get some more clarification on it, and then we can go from there.
We did have the discipline section that's highlighted on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I
remember
think,
that specific part.
if we wanted to have language in here that in the case of multiple exposures and the I can't remember those acronyms, the emergency leave is exhausted, I think that could be done on a case-by-case basis, but we also want that in there to protect our folks now, so they know that if they get multiple exposure through school, that they're not being penalized financially or by the loss of their own sick leave.
And my concern a little bit would be around the ESPs specifically, because the last time we were here, it was the position of the district that ESPs can't necessarily do their work from home because there's not enough phone calls to answer or something along those lines. And chances are these are the people who are going to be manning the COVID rooms anyway. And so my concern would be these people get exposed, they go through their emergency leave provided by the federal government, and then they have to start using their own sick time because they were told to be in a room where they may not even have wanted to be in. But regardless of their desire to be in that room, it's happening at the workplace.
Yeah, we understand and hear your concerns, both to Althea and to Brandon. So we're not disagreeing with that. Let me just find out from Linda specifically what we are allowing our employees, and I'll let you know. So if you want to come back to this, we can.
Well, I guess I'm still kind of a little frustrated because we had this conversation last week, and I thought Linda was going to be here today, and
Not necessarily a part of the bargaining team.
I know
And
she
she
said
doesn't
yesterday that she was coming because she had certain questions that were being asked in her department. And it's just, I'm a little frustrated because I really think we're close and we can get to an agreement tonight. But we really feel that this piece needs to be in here.
So I've heard you say that several times, and I'm checking on it.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing. So
Okay.
if you want to proceed, I suggest you proceed, and then we can go from there.
Sure thing. So just to finish this section up, Laura, with the safety protocols, according to my notes, we were talking about the sick days kind of on this thread, but also noting it in section D with the leaves.
Are you talking about A, safety protocol?
Yeah. In section D, where it starts to talk about leaves of absence, that we were also referencing the sick days in there as well.
Okay. So what's on the screen is where we had it. We added that highlighted sentence.
Okay. All right. And then the last piece in the safety protocols before we move on to part B.
The letter, sorry.
So part A, number 15. Discussion last time, and I just wanted to make sure we were still all okay with it. That the expedited grievance procedure for health and safety violations, I think we landed on 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we're good with that. Okay. So now moving into section B. And again, this is a lot of the same conversation that we had last week, just kind of picking up some of these pieces. So, and when I opened this document, when you had written the comments from the district side, it had like messed up and it took some of the like moved things to the comment side. So I went off the original merge document letter because it wouldn't pull up if it was deleted with the new letter. So in part B, looking at number 4, sorry, number 3, PDPs. We feel that during the first quarter, while everybody is really trying to learn this stuff, that IACs would be more appropriate. And because PDPs can lead to termination. And we wanted to this first 9 weeks to where people didn't get the hammer thrown down on them for still learning and navigating through this craziness. And that if the principal did see some concern, they could go through the IAC process, which has its own time structures anyway, even though it's informal. And that PDPs for e-school and blended learning specifically, not saying that they couldn't be on a PDP for maybe something else, but specifically for like lesson delivery and e-school and blended learning, because PDPs can lead to termination. And so we wanted PDPs to not be written for e-school issues or learning issues, at least until the second quarter, to give people time to get their feet wet in this. And that was in 3 and under 3.
So I think that's fair. Are you okay? Principals, how do you feel? Are y'all okay with that? Yes, no, maybe?
Okay. So then you will then accept professional development plans will not be utilized during the first 4 weeks of the school calendar, and we can add in for e-school or blended learning related concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Can we specify instructional concerns?
That's fine too. Yep. Yep. Okay. So going on to part B, number 4, that's where the campus e-school language resides. So just to recap, we did agree upon class size for campus e-school be maintained at the school averages. But we had some discussion on the rest of that. And our position still is maintained that some of this is referenced mostly in the ICP, but even the ICP references the CBA and MOUs, subsequent MOUs that could be developed, and even both sides reference the CBA for specific purposes. We really strongly feel that peace of mind needs to be in this MOU for our instructional staff. And we wanted to add back in for the email that we had sent you that teachers will assign working grades as they normally would in campus learning, with students adhering to a teacher's grading and late work policies. 5, from the merge document, teachers and support staff will be available for parent-guardian contact only during non-student contact time during their normal duty day. Each teacher will provide parents and guardians with preferred contact information and schedule of availability for conferences. Bargaining employees will not be required to provide alternate office hours outside of their contractual work hours. In no event will the bargaining unit employees' workday be exceeded. And then we had, through discussion over the last 2 weeks, talked about the video content. And so what I did in the email was video content will not be used by the district for any purpose or exhibited in any other context without the written permission of the bargaining unit employee. And then adding back in our language, if a student is consistently failing to complete assignments and or has a failing grade, teachers will reasonably attempt to contact the student's parent through platforms including but not limited to Schoology, phone message, etc. Teachers will not be required to use their personal phone or email to do so. If they are consistently unable to parent after multiple attempts or have any other issues regarding parent response, student participation, attendance, and or grades, the teacher will notify an administrator who will address the situation. Employees shall not be disciplined for students' lack of access, participation, grades, or attendance if documentation supports their attempts and efforts to make contact. And then 5K, which was the district's original language. And then we had, in the email, had proposed to add in continuous live-stream failed to fail is not expected or considered best practices. Posted recorded lessons is at the teacher's discretion.
So, in looking at (5E), email document. She's talking about 5E, 5F, 5H, 5J.
The numbers have changed.
That's why I went in the district's comment document, it wasn't lining up. And so the original merge document, what I referenced.
Hold on, let me find it.
Oh, and I think we talked about this last week, but the instructional delivery requirements from the pre-planning and review, we wanted added to the section as well, so that it moves over from the pre-planning document.
Yeah, I have it right here. Just opened it. So regarding teachers will assign, trying to find it as well. No, I haven't. I'm good, thank you. So on teachers will assign working grades as they normally would in campus learning, with students adhering to a teacher's grading and late work policies. I don't think we have an issue with that. It's in section 2 of the ICP already, so we're good there.
So, okay.
Where do you want it?
So on the next one, teachers and support staff will be available for parent and guardian contact only during non-student contact time. And during their normal duty day, each teacher will provide parents and guardians with preferred contact information and schedule of availability for conferences. Bargaining unit employees will not be required to provide alternative office hours outside of their contractual hours. In no event will the bargaining unit employees' workday be exceeded. So we don't necessarily have an issue with that. I think one of the things that we are trying to be mindful of is just that things are different. And so the only in that first sentence is a bit restrictive, because teachers may want to, given everything that's going on, they may want to talk to parents outside of their normal contract time and outside of their non-student contact time. So we thought that that may have been a bit restrictive.
Well, and again, that's nothing
Not
here.
trying to, hold on for 1 second. We're not trying to exceed their work day at all. But if that's a time that is good for them and for the parent, then we believe that they should have the option to do that. And so, especially during the first couple of weeks now, with everything being so chaotic, again, it's not a mandatory thing, but we are just saying we believe that it should be voluntary and is based on that teacher.
Well, I think it usually already is dealt that way. So nothing in here restricts the teacher from doing it. They just cannot be required to work outside of their duty day. They're not required to have office hours outside of their duty day. They shouldn't be having, like, when they're in instructional time, you know, they shouldn't be having parent conferences like during that time. Because with eSchool, some of the funny and more worrisome complaints that I've seen, and I don't think it's systemic, but parents are jumping in to eSchool classes because they're there. And so we want to make sure that teachers know that they don't have to stop their instruction to deal with a parent. And obviously they would their admin know. This was just to kind of lay out parameters that teachers knew exactly what was and what isn't expected of them.
So the only thing that we would like to do then with this language is remove the word only. So teachers and support staff will be available for parent and guardian contact during non-student contact time and during their normal duty day.
Okay.
And then each teacher will provide parent and guardians with preferred contact information and schedule of availability for conferences. Bargaining unit employees will not be required. So again, that gives them flexibility.
Mhm.
And I would want to say something, but again, like if they so choose in here, because a lot of our teachers have been really, really accommodating with our parents to make sure that they have what they need outside of the duty day. And that includes text messages or a phone call or a Zoom call or whatever the contact method is. So I think it is important while we put this language in here and we acknowledge that, yeah, it's there. I think it's important for everyone to realize that they do have the option of doing it. And so I think we need something in there about them voluntarily doing it.
So so I guess I don't think anything in here right now says that they can't do it on their own. They just cannot be required to do it by a supervisor. So
In no
am I
event,
reading
so it
things
says in no
wrong?
event will the bargaining unit employees' workday be exceeded. So you're saying it can't be at all, even if it's voluntary. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that it should be voluntary and it's up to the teacher if they want to do it. We won't ask them to do it. Well, I can't say we won't ask them to do it. We won't mandate that they do it. But if they volunteer to do it, then it should be up to them.
Well, then how about in no event will the bargaining unit employees' workday be required to exceed their duty day? And I didn't
I would
say that.
just put bargaining unit employees will not be required to, (1) provide alternative work hours outside of their contractual time, or 2, work be exceeded beyond the duty day.
Okay.
In the video content will not be used by the district for any purposes or exhibited in any other context without written permission of the bargaining unit employees. I think this is where we had a bit of an issue. Tony, do you want to address this? You want to come over? Or are you on?
No. Can you hear me?
I don't think they can
But I
hear.
don't think people that are here.
Oh, did that? Okay.
Okay. I don't think my headphone's working.
Well, he has a voice that carries, so maybe it's not.
How's that?
Hold on.
That's my headphones. Take them out.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, I think what we discussed during the last meeting.
He went silent.
Okay, no, now am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. I think one of the things that we had discussed in the previous meeting was, while we understand the union's position relative to videos being used and things of that nature, and especially those videos that happen to be taken by kids without the express written permission of the instructional staff member, we're still, if in the course of those videos, it shows some type of inappropriate behavior or a policy violation, and then those particular videos come into our possession, we're gonna have to use them. There's no way that that cannot be used as evidence. I think that was.
So I guess so we had stricken through the disciplinary language in that first part. And so I guess what maybe the intent here is not necessarily for disciplinary purposes, but for just sharing content without their permission. So how could we?
Give me an example.
So like you couldn't publicize their Schoology videos without them knowing. You couldn't share their content without them knowing. So I guess maybe the discipline, because we had stricken through that because we understood where Tony was coming from in that argument. So if that doesn't read that way to you, how can we?
So it just says video content. So do you want to say recorded lesson?
Or can I offer up if we said,
Are you muted?
no, I muted myself. Am I good? If we said instructional video content,
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
just add instructional to that sentence, the first word of that sentence.
Okay.
So the last one is if a student is consistently failing to complete assignments and/or has a failing grade, teachers will reasonably attempt to contact the student's parents through platforms including but not limited to Schoology, phone messages, emails, etc. In my notes, I have so one, every reasonable effort should be made and documented. And so it says, I guess we need to, I would like maybe some definitions, maybe a loose definition around what it is in terms of reaching a parent. The teacher will notify the administrator who will address the situation. And then attendance if documentation supports the attempt. Like, what does that documentation look like specifically? Number one. Number two, with the next sentence, teachers will not be required to use their personal phone. Again, in this section, if you get a Google number, that Google number is then tied or can be your personal phone and tied to your personal phone. So we need to at least allow them to do that. And then
I think they can. It just says that they won't be required. So if that's something they want to do, they can do that. You just can't be directed to do that because they can also use Jive through their computer.
And that's what we were about to say as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that I thought we had landed that was okay because it's not restricting the employee if they want to.
They're not required to.
But they're not required to, meaning that they're being directed by a supervisor to do that.
So it says teachers will not be required to use their personal phone or personal email is what you're at. You mean personal email? So add personal email there.
Okay.
And then how are they documenting that? Are we going to have a form for them to document
Just how they would document however they wanted to. I mean, I wrote it down in several different places depending on how the contact was. Yeah.
Okay.
I would document in Focus. I would have a call log. So I think they're going to document however they want to document, whatever's best for them. I don't think we should micromanage that part because everybody's going to want to document differently, just like they normally would. So I think whatever works best.
Well, even in a Title I school, we have documentation for Title I that we can utilize for that as well. So we document it that way.
Yeah, so I think leaving that up to the teacher or the school making that a decision is probably best.
Okay.
My only concern, I guess, that I have is if I ask a teacher, hey, please call this parent back. The parent reaches out to me, I always say, hey, have you reached out to the teacher? Please call this parent back. Am I going to be in trouble for asking you to call the parent if you're going to use your personal device? That's where the language, I think, is a little fun. I think it should be like, you don't have to maybe have to use your personal number, something along that line, but I might ask you to call the parent back because that's what you normally would do if you were at school.
I think it's just because they have, all instructional staff, they have a laptop.
Right.
Or computer, and they can use Jive if they wanted to call through the computer. I think that's where it's not saying that I'm not going to call because Mr. Bruno is telling me to call him when I'm at home. You know, I could use Jive.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right.
They do have that available to them. So they should still be able to follow that directive, whether they want to use a Google number, their personal phone, or the Jive platform for their computer.
Okay.
And then if they're not following that, then that would be purview to address that.
Because one of my concerns is like at Auburndale High School would be like, if you're saying, hey, I've emailed this parent 10 times, well, you need to do something else.
Yeah.
You know, obviously that's not working. It's like emailing a kid. If they're not where you got to do something else to get a hold of that kid.
Yeah.
So that's my only concern about that part of it.
Well, I don't think that it restricts it at all. It just is giving them options because all instructional staff that would be calling parents are going to have a distribution laptop that they can call through that platform.
So you okay with it, Ty?
Yeah, I just think it's, I don't know, still, I just don't want to be called out on it with something and it's like, well, I can't use my phone to call. But
then I think the response would be, well, use your district laptop and do Drive. And if not, then we'll have to have another conversation. I don't think that that's really.
Say use my phone. I mean, realistically, you got a bunch of phones. Yeah, after you sanitize it. You have quite a phones around the district that can be used. So I would say maybe provide them another option. How about that? Okay, so.
We're okay with that? Or?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Is the team okay with it? Oh, Lauren, I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Lauren.
I know that like last spring, I had one student that never turned in anything. And I called, I talked to the parent, I talked to the kid, we even sent the social worker out to the house. So, and it was all documented on notes. And any teacher that's worth their salt is going to be writing down. I called so-and-so just today, parent. I got an email message to call a parent, and I called and the parent didn't answer, but I wrote down, I called and returned this call so that I have that paper trail.
Part was the district's original language. But then we wanted to add in the piece about the continuous live streaming, bell to bell. So, and I know we had talked about that a couple of times ago, and that's not the expectation. But we just wanted that to be very solidified in there, that is not the expectation. And that posting recorded lessons is at the teacher's discretion.
So I have a question about the recorded lessons. What does that mean?
So like if they're recording their live stream and then they want to post them, that if they want to do that, then that's up to them.
Post it where?
Like on Schoology.
Okay. But not, are you saying that they can use that recorded lesson to substitute instruction later on, like live instruction later on?
Not necessarily, but like for absences, like if somebody's absent,
okay.
Just like if I would take notes, I had a notebook available for anybody who was absent. It's kind of like that. So but it wouldn't be required. Like they didn't have to post them, but they could if they wanted to for absent students, or just as another resource for students to be able to go back and watch the live lesson. And so we wanted to add it, and we thought that it was appropriate.
Can I may have one ask on this one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the sentence that reads, the length of the live direct instruction will be at the discretion of the teacher while honoring bell schedules and required seat time. I just am thinking if we remove the words length of the live instruction, because when we talk about honor bell schedule and required seat time, I think that aligns with our requirements of the state, and we want that to kind of take precedence over anything else. And so as I reread that sentence again this week, I made a note about omitting just that part so that there was no doubt that we were still honoring the bell schedule and seat time.
I'm okay with that. That was
yeah.
Your guys' original language, but you want to amend that.
In a couple of things that came up, just made me think about that in that regard.
Can you read it one more time?
We really would just omit. So it'd be the live direct instruction will be at the discretion of the teacher while honoring bell schedules and required seat time. Okay. So let's that state language kind of take precedence.
Oh, I'm okay with that. All right. So it sounds like the eSchool B5 is wrapped up. So moving on to number 6, blended learning. We had landed on the class size mirroring the same language that we had in the eSchool, that they would do class size averages. And then let me pull up my notes.
Hey, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Can we go back to that just for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you go back up to that one that you just highlighted and agreed to? Because the first sentence, and I'm sorry,
The first sentence says it is expected that teachers have their computer laptop camera on for all direct instruction while teaching remotely, whether the class is remote. I'm as a teacher, I want to be clear, like, the laptop camera on, like, because I'll tell you, because especially with the blended learning right now, I'll have my screen shared maybe, but they're not necessarily seeing my face a whole lot. And then I might not have it on for all direct instruction, like a lot, like, I'm getting on my computer and saying, going through my first spiel, giving some instructions, and for my e-learners saying, here's the assignment. My face-to-face are working on the assignment. I'm going to be back in 15 minutes to talk to you. For right now, I'm turning, shutting the link down or whatever. So I just want to make sure.
So
that reads to me like I have to have my camera on the whole class period. That first sentence.
I think it's what you described in that direct instruction piece. So like as you described, you're transitioning into working with students in a small group, that's ideal. That's what we want you to do. But one of the things is that I do think it's important for teachers to have their camera on so students see you, you see them. I was able to observe some teachers today actually, and they were doing a great job, but seeing their face was very important to that piece of the delivery model.
And there are times, but there's also, since I'm circulating my room for my face-to-face kids, they're not, most of the time, a lot of the time they're hearing my voice. They see me at the beginning when I'm having a conversation or when I'm giving instructions, but then when we're having a whole class and they're just listening in, I'm not, I share my screen. My camera doesn't need to be pointed at a board. They get that anyway,
So if it read, it is expected that teachers have their computer laptop camera on and or share their screen for all direct instruction.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
So moving on to blended learning, we were good with the class size, the school-wide class size averages, the same language that was in the e-school section. Let me pull up my notes. And then adding in the pre-planning MOU language, that teachers in the predominantly blended learning schedule will collaborate with their evaluator to create an observation schedule. Adding that into the blended learning section from the pre-planning MOU. And I think we were good with that. I'm just going through. We were good with the class size average. And I think the last piece, and that all provisions in B5 Campus eSchool would apply to the blended learning model. Since they're having to do eSchool, everything agreed to in 5 would apply here. And so really the last piece to talk about is the stipend. And we had sent back after our initial discussion with this, a slightly different number and model. And then I'd also sent some rationales back to you guys with the document that Mike had provided me after last week with the assurances. And so the ESSER document from the CARES Act. And so we feel that this should be in this MOU. It shouldn't be in a separate salary proposal because it's contingent upon COVID specifically. It shouldn't be in a regular CBA and our supplements or stipends area because essentially this stipend would go away once blended learning goes away, hopefully when we're back to normal. Hernando County did sign a stipend for blended learning. And so there is a precedent, and I know some other counties have tried, and they're still at the table negotiating that. But Hernando does have a signed MOU for blended learning stipends. And I know Mike had shared with me after last meeting and then sent the ESSER document that he felt that any stipends should fall under the recruitment, retention, and reward incentives and kind of be modeled how our UNISIG and TISA monies were dealt out last year. And we disagree because it really falls under the assurances. And so because, I mean, straight from the language, in accordance with section 18003D of the CARES Act, the allowable uses of these funds are as follows, and number 12 specifically says other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services in local educational agencies and continuing to employ existing staff in the local educational agency. And so we really feel that the first part of that assurance applies here because blended learning exists so that we can, you know, have necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services in local educational agencies. You know, we're having to do blended learning to accommodate, you know, this new way of COVID right now. And so the stipend should fall under the CARES Act number 12 and not as a recruitment, retention, and reward incentive because that would present a whole other slew of problems because you're forcing teachers to do blended learning and then you're saying that a VAM or their STAR growth model from even the year before would have to be used and that some people wouldn't get money even though they're doing the same work. And so it should fall under number 12 under the CARES Act assurances. And even with our initial costing out of this, with the $400 per quarter, and then you adding $100 each class up to 6, because if they're teaching 7 blended, they're already getting the extra period pay, so that wouldn't count for the 7th class. But that would be like 1.3 million if this were to go on for the whole year. And we have about 7 million left of the CARES Act money. And we think that this would be a very good use of that one-time expenditure because, I mean, we wouldn't be doing blended learning if it weren't for COVID.
So I just want to make sure we are clear. I don't think it was Mike's opinion. Based on what we received from the Department of Education, that was the guidance that we received. So it wasn't necessarily Mr. Perrone's opinion. I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. That was what we received from the guidance that we received from the Department of Education that said it had to be the VAM data, and the VAM data had to be attached to it. So just want to make sure.
But what was their reasoning? Because it doesn't seem like this isn't a recruitment, retention, or reward incentive. You're not having teachers move to D or F schools. I mean, we don't have F schools, but we have D schools. You're not having teachers move as an incentive or recruitment. This is because they're doing extra work right now. And so what was the DOE's reasoning for wanting to put it there other than?
So Mike shared with you the email, and that's what the logic and the reasoning was there. And so it wasn't, they didn't provide a lot of advice. This is just what they provided. And so we sent that email directly to you. So you have essentially what we have.
So, and I guess I still didn't, even in reading the email that Mike had sent, I didn't really see, at least it wasn't sound reasoning to me. And why wouldn't we be able to pull this out of assurance number 12? I mean, is the DOE the end all be all here?
Mike, you want to answer?
I mean, we should have some local control of that money if it's falling under assurances that are laid out in the federal expenditure plan.
So, as Ted just said, we sent up real quick that day the question of paying a stipend. We didn't get into all of this. That being said, we haven't even looked at, your reasoning versus that, and the question of whether the state's the end or be all. I'd have to say yes, because they told us no on a number of things, and we've stopped and redid it. They tell us what can be spent out of it. So if it's a proposal, and if it's a proposal that the board approves and likes, we can send it through an amendment, and if it gets passed, it gets passed. This is not a Tedra or Mike thing.
So, and I want to just make sure we're clear. So you're asking for, your new ask is, instead of $761, is $400 per quarter?
And then
for one time. Okay, so I checked on Hernando's, and Hernando's is $250 per semester.
Yeah.
So that's a total of $1,000. And it's not even dependent upon one class period or one block of time. So it seems as if, and I checked with other districts as well. So Orange currently is not agreeing to anything, and Palm Beach isn't either. I'm not sure what's going on in Hillsborough, because no one really knows what's going on in Hillsborough. But I wonder if, I just think that is a bit steep for what you're proposing, even if it is 1.2 million in terms of what the precedent is and what has been set by other districts. It's only $250 per semester, not $400 per quarter, plus additional funds for each class. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about the cost.
So, I mean, I guess if we do this as a separate, we're going to pull this and do it as a separate proposal. If you guys want to counter with something that you think is more reasonable, we'll take a look at what you're countering.
It just seems a bit high, but okay.
Okay. Let me unmute. So just to be clear, we're not striking this, but we're going to pull it separate. And then that way we can hopefully come to an agreement on the body of the MOU today, and then we can look at the money part separately. With the stipend going to be pulled into a separate proposal, it sounds like we're okay with number 6, blended learning.
This meeting for the school board? No. All right, and then so moving on to number 7. Number 7 was the original district language. And so we had a few questions with that have been presented in the merge document before we met on the 19th. But we didn't quite get here to this piece. And so you had proposed that teachers would be proctoring one campus e-school class period at the school site during the virtual instruction by another teacher. This temporary reassignment is for the purpose of maintaining classroom management and should not prevent the planning time of the proctoring teacher. But I do know that paras are proctoring in certain cases. And so how is that working? Are they just being temporarily reassigned? Is that their new job? Are they getting sub pay? So for number 7, so I know that you said that teachers could, but I know that paras are currently being pulled to do this also.
It's all hands on deck.
And I understand that. So
So are they being temporarily reassigned that duty? Or are they getting, like an unfilled job number, getting sub pay with this?
So the teachers that are e-learning, is that what you're talking about?
Well,
So teachers that are e-learning, and then they have a blended face-to-face and e-learning students. So what we have to do is make sure that the students that are there face-to-face while the teacher is e-learning is adequately supervised. So no instruction is being given or provided by the para, which would normally take place if there were a sub, meaning if Mrs. Nickel is out and a sub is being pulled because we can't find a Kelly sub, then we would pay that para the sub pay to go over the lessons to make sure everything is being done. In this case, it's a difference in that they're not necessarily doing any of that. They're literally proctoring, much like it would be for one of the exams, or because the teacher of record is actually during the instruction that's being piped in electronically. Does that make sense? So for me, I would say no in terms of the paras being provided sub pay. It's just a part of kind of their temporary duty for what they're doing for that day, because it may change. They may not do it every day. Administrators may be in there some days. We're working out the bus driver things this week, I think. So that was sent to principals. So sometimes bus drivers may be in there proctoring and kind of doing the same sort of monitoring. And so no one is being paid extra to do the proctoring or monitoring of the students, particularly because they're not doing the instruction piece. The instruction piece is still provided by the teacher of record, which is being piped in electronically.
Okay. And so if a teacher were actually sick and not able to do the instruction in a para, they would have an unfilled job number then.
And then therefore they would get the sub pay.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, DJ.
I was wondering if the parents realize that their children might be at school face-to-face, but there's no teacher in the classroom and their teacher is teaching their children remotely. Is that being told to the parents?
Yes, that is being told.
Okay, thank you. Just because a lot of people have stated that they didn't know that was an option.
So we've been pretty transparent with parents and the community in terms of what's going on and how we are staffing our classrooms. And so, as I said, it's an all hands on deck in terms of everybody really being pulled. I know that administrators are covering some classrooms, they're covering lunches, et cetera. So everybody is really helping out to make sure that that teacher that has e-learning, whether or not it's due to an accommodation or just due to them wanting to have e-learning, that their classrooms are covered. And so we, again, have been very transparent and very open with the community about what's going on in our classes. Michelle, do you want to say anything else? Or maybe Mr. Hill, do you want to say anything else?
Thank you.
We're okay with that.
We can't hear.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so moving on to number 8, distance learning equipment and support. Reading your comments, we're okay with striking access to the internet, because if they're distance learning, they should have that set up. But everything else is being given to them, so we're okay with striking access to internet. So it should be district will ensure bargaining unit employees who are conducting distance learning have adequate computers, digital materials, cloud, or other storage, as well as instructional platforms to conduct their work. And then we're okay with your deletion in B. The district will provide employees with approved learning platforms to conduct distance learning. We're okay with, yeah. And then C, we're okay with your addition, the school network manager or an administrator. So you had added the underlined language. So we're okay with that addition. And then C, oh wait, sorry. I guess it's D now, sorry. D, the district will develop a plan to obtain employee feedback and concerns regarding digital platforms, including but not limited to feedback on ease of use, security, and student interaction and participation, and will make necessary modifications to use of digital platforms accordingly. We didn't see a note on that. Were you guys okay with that? Or was there any discussion? Because we didn't have a comment.
No, I'm okay with that. We actually are already doing it.
Okay.
So on the, just so you know, on the technology kind of implementation piece and the logistics of that part, we're doing that through our teacher hotline and capturing all the questions and kind of debriefing on that daily, and probably will transition to weekly.
Okay.
And then I know the content areas are building specific feedback surveys. We're thinking we're going to directly place them with the maps so that they can give that instant feedback. So some of it's already up and running.
All right, perfect. Well then, I think we're good with that then. So that, oh, and then we had a question. We did look at the CBA language here. And so did you just want to reference CBA language for equipment so that they know to go look at our current language for that? And then also you had some additions underlined. Is that something that you wanted to add in Part E?
Yeah, I think those additions were things that Dr. Barrios had expressed some concern about, things that had already happened.
We're okay with that addition. Did you want to reference the CBA, or did you just want to have the language in there for the equipment use?
Yeah, I think if we reference, I'm trying to think where would be the best place to put it.
Thank you. So in talking to Dr. Barrios about some things that she's seeing when equipment is being returned, she is concerned about obviously the spilling, cracked screens, et cetera. So you said something about our current CBA. What were you? So this is what you're asking?
Yeah, it's the piece where the employees sign for their equipment usage.
Yeah, like the board recognizes that some external equipment may be damaged, broken, or lost in normal course of education. Employees may be charged the current depreciated value. Oh.
I think you just speak closer. I think you're on there.
Okay. So the current CBA language is in there, and I didn't know if you wanted to just reference it or just leave it as is. The way it's written, or did you just want to reference the CBA?
I'd rather leave it as it is.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Oh. Okay, so then,
yep.
So taking out the including but not limited to?
No, I want that in there.
We're good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, we're good.
And the last sentence in green.
Yeah, that was the one that she really well, wait.
That was y'all's addition, but we're okay with that if.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so Number 8, it was the return to the regular school sites for 21-22 school year. I know that Ms. Burke had talked about that at some of the school board meetings over the summer about allowing full virtual teachers once this is over, if they can move forward to full virtual, to move back into their regular school sites. And I know there are some logistical challenges to that. But we wanted to have something in there that they at least got some choices if they couldn't go back to their, like if they were supposed to be at Kathleen High School, but they went virtual, they get to go back to Kathleen High School. But if for whatever reason that's not possible, having something in there that they can send in their top 5 to try to get.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. The problem is that, and it's not really a problem. The issue is that our student units and allocations at school sites are based on student need. Mm-hmm. And so it has to be driven by not necessarily what the teacher wants in terms of, hey, I want to go back to Kathleen, especially if they don't have a unit available. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, and Sharita, maybe this is something that you can speak to, 9 times out of 10, when we're placing employees, we work with them to ask them what their options are and then go from there. And at that point, then we contact our principals and say, hey, Tedra would like to come to your school. Here's some information on her. And, do you think it'll be a good fit for your position? And then we'll go from there. So it's really collaborative from our office. We talk to them to make sure that, one, it'll be really a good fit for the teacher as well, knowing what the expectations are when they are going to the new school. So I think what Mrs. Burt was saying earlier is if that position is available, but realistically, based on what the budget looks like, I don't know if those positions will be there when if the executive order ends, and then if Polk Virtual should close, abruptly. But I don't even see that happening, to be honest with you.
So would you then be amenable to having kind of how you spell that out in here so people kind of know what the deal is coming back? Because they may not know all that goes into that, because most of them probably have not transferred like that before.
Right. Well, we would really just follow our normal displacement process. And so I guess, yes, we can spell out the normal displacement procedure in that. But I will say that Mrs. Arrington does a really fine job of working with not only our employees, but also our administrators to make sure that everybody's happy. So.
Well, then we're okay, because that's spelled out in the CBA. So
okay.
We can move on from that. All right, so length of the workday.
1 second, Stephanie.
Oh, sorry.
Could you look at the it is understood, because I don't know that we reached agreement yet, did we?
So we're striking that, because we're going to follow displacement procedures in the CBA.
What we just talked about?
Yeah.
All of this stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right, so the length of the workday, there were a few pieces in here that we had talked about even in the beginning of August when we first started meeting together. So the length of the workday. So I know we had talked about last time that we were changing students will be present to students may be present to give flexibility there, depending on their school. I think that was agreed to, changing the wills to mays. Okay, so we're okay with that. But we do want to have that additional supervision piece in. Because we know that teacher reporting times and teacher end times are very tight already with student report times and end times. And so in the event that you do need more supervision, either because buses or car rider lines are running late consistently right now, wanted to have that piece in so that it's mutually agreed upon that the employee could stay after their duty day, but they would be compensated at their regular hourly rate of pay. So if you need employees consistently after their duty day for bus duty or car duty, or even before school for whatever reason, and you can't make it work by changing their report and end times because they're already so tight, we wanted to give you guys that flexibility, but we also don't want people to just be volunteering their time on a consistent basis without getting compensation.
I'm going to push back on this, and maybe Mike can speak to it a bit more. Polk State just lost $2 million, right? At least $2 million from their budget. And I'm saying that because we know that budget cuts are literally around the corner for us. And so I get that employees, particularly just any employee, they want to be compensated for their time. I get that. And I'm not negating that. I think, though, we are in really unusual circumstances. And the 360 I'm hearing across the board is really hard for principals, given that we can't have students together. So Tedra's first grade class can't be with Laura's first grade class, and it can't be with Ty's first grade class. So how do we socially distance our first graders that are arriving or leaving school so that classes aren't together, right? And so we've tried to be really creative with that. But across the board, I'm hearing that the 360 is restrictive during this time. During a normal year, I would say not a problem. We can do it. Hence why we agreed to it last year. And I'm saying that to say, overall, if we keep nickel and diming our budget, we're not going to have the funds that we need to provide the necessary, for lack of a better term, raises when we get to that point. One. Two would be, I think if we need flexibility, just like we did with e-learning, this is our other big pot of needing flexibility, because if we don't have the staff there, how are you going to explain to me as a parent when my child is left on the side of the road or in pickup without a person there? If you say to me, oh, well, teachers aren't compensated, I'm going to have a problem with that as a parent. And I think many parents will have problems with that. And so I just want us to be mindful of the message that we are sending when we're almost mandating that we have to pay employees extra time for duty time in unusual circumstances. It's not a regular year. It's truly an unusual year. And so I'm a bit hesitant about the additional pay piece there. That's just me. Mike, do you want to say anything? If you speak loud enough, I'm sure.
Yeah, I probably could, but I don't want to yell. I was waiting until we get to salaries to get into all that, but I'm struggling with all of this in terms of salaries. No matter what fund we're talking about taking it from. So when we get to salaries, I have a bunch of questions because you did send a spreadsheet and some numbers that I need to go over and ask, and just so that I can, when I talk to the board, I just will echo or be a little stronger than what Tedra's saying, because we're looking at salaries, not only in the CARES funds, but adding to salaries in the general fund when other districts are, and maybe I'm not doing a good job of what they call scaring or for the community, the board and the staff. They're going out and showing how many people are going to be cut from their budget next year. based on the assumed cuts. And I haven't done that. And maybe that's why we're coming up and having proposal costs that we can't afford. But we'll have that conversation when we get there. But I'm, well, and I'll just leave it at that. We'll get to it when we get to salary.
Well, I think that your site-based administrators have been creative in keeping with 360. There are still issues out there, and trust me, we hear about them, and we let you guys know. And we've been working with the regionals to try to get that under control when we do hear about it. But we do know that there are going to be cases where, like at Elbert Elementary School, they had problems last year with busing and staying till 4 o'clock. They're definitely having the same issues now, staying till 4 or 4:30, with busing. And you can't expect people to stay an hour after their contract time every day for nothing. They're already doing so much extra because this is hard. And it's a learning curve for a lot of people. And they're working their weekends. They're working right now as we talk. And so you can't expect people to just give and give and give with nothing in return. And so this allows you that if a principal has been as creative as they can be to try to hit that 360, and they've adjusted work, report times and end times as much as they can, even though there's not a lot of wiggle room there, you've got to pay people. You cannot tell somebody that they got to be at bus. And this is not necessarily so much at the high schools, because we would always just 2 o'clock, go on about your day, kid. But at the elementary schools, it's a problem because you can't leave those kids by themselves, or you can't leave 200 kids with one administrator. And so you're consistently taking advantage of that person's time because they're not going to leave that kid because they care about that kid. But you also cannot continue to take advantage of them. And so I get that emergencies come up. Teachers and support staff get that emergencies come up, right? And they've stayed extra, but it cannot be a consistent thing. And this is happening right now where it's a consistent problem and they're staying half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour after their duty day still supervising children. And that cannot happen. And if a school does have to do that because of whatever reason, they have busing problems, they're having problems with car lines, whatever, you cannot consistently expect that person to stay after their duty day and not pay them.
Good night.
Go ahead.
Am I good? Can you hear me? All right. Can the sentence where it says in the event that more adult supervision is needed, the way I'm kind of reading that language is that the principal will make a determination, right? So he would assess the situation and then determine that the employee's duty day by mutual agreement, is needed, and therefore the compensation would kick in. But if it's a systemic problem, an unexpected one that happens to occur on the spot on that day, would we then, and say they ended up calling PEA, we would then call you and say, hey, something went wrong, the teacher's staying after the kids are still waiting for the buses. That's, in that event, I guess the question is, they wouldn't get compensated because it's a systemic problem that occurred on that particular day. The principal would then fix it, do the best he or she can to fix it, right? And then we move on. But if the principal early in the morning or at some point in the day assesses that I need more duty time at the end of the day, then he can then trigger this language and then get compensated. I'm just talking out, could that language be read that way? Because it says in the event that more adult supervision is needed, someone has to make that assessment. I'm assuming it would be the principal or some supervisor.
But it says by mutual agreement.
So that if I'm the teacher, I can't just stay after my duty day and help with bus duty and then go to Ty and say, hey, Ty, pay me now. And Ty didn't ask me to stay, right? And so by mutual agreement, it really is a need for the school, saying that I know buses are staying consistently late 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Like I need 5 teachers to stay or 5 support staff to stay after their duty day. And then if they agree to do that, then those 5 people get compensated. And so this isn't necessarily even for the entire staff, because you don't need the entire staff to necessarily stay. But this is trying to give site-based administrators some flexibility so that they're not getting hit by us. Well, you're out of the 360 student contact minutes, or you're going consistently over their duty day. And so by mutual agreement, you know, it keeps abuse down, because it's really only the need of the principal. And then the teacher or the support staff would agree to stay. Yes, I want to stay. But then that person would get compensated for that extra 15 minutes or that extra 20 or extra 30 minutes. I mean, we're trying to be flexible here, but you cannot ask people to consistently stay and not be compensated. That's not okay, when they're already doing so much on their own time. It's just not right. And again, I go back, that's why we have non-reoccurring CARES Act money, to help in these situations. And it's mainly going to be at your elementary schools, because secondary, for the most part, releases them. You know, once the bell rings, they go out. And so your elementary schools need some help here. And we're trying to offer a solution that would be okay with us, but you've got to pay them, whether it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes. But it's not just people willy-nilly staying or just deciding amongst themselves that they're going to stay. It would be because Ty needs them to stay, and he's asked them, and they're okay with it, and then they're going to get paid. And again, it's not even for your whole staff. You might only need 5 people to stay an extra 20 or 30 minutes to make it work so that your kids are supervised.
So we've always worked with our teaching staff. Always. They need to come in late because they have their own parental duties. If they need to, and not only our teaching staff, all of our staff, we've always worked with them. We've been flexible with their time. And we've assisted them with their own personal lives and matters. So I'm saying that to say, when a teacher does morning duty and then starts earlier, or if they do afternoon duty and start and stay later, I would say that principals have been flexible with them, and they've worked with them so that they don't go well over or exceedingly over the 360. So given that, we will not be able to pay them. We won't be able to build another stipend for them. I think we can adjust. We've adjusted a lot, and this is a year definitely of adjusting. And so
teacher A gets out at 3:15 from 40th Elementary School, but she still has kids in her classroom. She's stuck. She's stuck there because either she leaves her kids, which is not okay, or she's stuck. And again, this is kind of a
so
last
most times
resort.
they drop them off in the front office. They take them to an area. They don't just leave the kids in the classroom.
No, that's
this is
what I'm saying.
principals.
So you're saying
Hold on
at
for 1 second.
3:15.
Principals, this is where you all can kind of come in. I don't know of a teacher at 3:15 that says, I got to go at 3:15 and I have students in my classroom. I'm just going to leave them there and peace, I'm out.
Well, what I'm saying is those are your options. So if you're not letting them or not compensating them for being there late, right? They're going to stay because it's the right thing to do. But then you're taking advantage of their time.
They don't stay though. If they have to leave at 3:15, they take them to the front office and drop them off and then go from there.
Every teacher then that gets off at 3:15, 3:30, if they all decide that they want to leave at their contract time.
If they choose,
Then they
the
come from
issue
the
is they
office
volunteer.
and
If
go?
they want to stay late, they stay late. If they don't, they talk to their principal and say, hey, Ty, I gotta go.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're playing on the teachers, because the teachers are very committed to the students. You know,
I was a teacher. I stayed late many a days, many a days. I get it. I'm not playing on that. I'm saying we can't compensate for it. We can't compensate them for that. And realistically, I feel like PEA is trying to put us over a barrel. You know that we're in a difficult budget year. You know that we're in a difficult time right now with COVID. You know everything going on. And then you're saying, oh, because you can't do the 360, you got to pay them. Because you can't do this, because, you know, we are already, you've seen the recommendations from the Department of Health regarding making sure the classes are separated. I mean, you've seen all this, Stephanie. We've been very transparent with you on everything that we're doing to make sure that our kids are safe, to make sure that our teachers are safe. We don't want to even commingle because we want to make sure that Tedra is not spreading it to Laura. So we're doing all these things, and then you're still asking for compensation, even though Mike has said, hey, we're in a budget year, even though Polk State has lost $2 million, even though the state has said, hey, y'all ain't gonna have any money after November. Get ready for January because it's coming. And so I'm bothered by this whole thing. I get it. If we could, we definitely would. And I think maybe that's the clear point. If we had the money to pay them, we would definitely pay them. We would. But just like you're asking for some allowances, this one is a bit much. So
I just want to be clear. I just want
clear as kind. Go ahead.
Clear as kind. That, and I'm going to use Elbert because I know that they have a busing problem.
I'm a little concerned when we start using specific schools or specific principals because they're not here and there's two sides to every story. I looked into the situation that was brought up last week and there was another side to that. So I would like for us to consider that in those type of situations. And if there is a specific situation, we'll work through it like we've got some requests to do so.
So elementary school that's having busing issues. I mean, contractually, those teachers can leave at 3:30 if they want, and so they're taking their kids to the office if their buses haven't been there, and then they're leaving because they're not being compensated for the extra time, and they're not going to be disciplined because they're leaving their students in the office. And I'm not trying to be difficult here. I'm really not.
So then why not say, Tedra, can they flex their time? Tedra, can they use some of their time for on a work day or on a PD day? Why not do that?
Well, I mean, flex where? We've already taken a lot of the PD days away because of when we moved the calendar. So then they're flexing their teacher work days. I mean, but not all support staff have work days like teachers do.
But they do have normal hourly days.
And they're already working 10, 12, 14-hour days. Where are we going to flex this time? Administrators are getting drowned. Teachers are getting drowned. I feel like there is this giant disconnect, with what the district thinks. I've listened to this grand narrative being constructed. Mike, Mr. Perone, I absolutely agree. We are in for a world of hurt next year. You don't need to be sounding the alarm at this table. You need to be sounding the alarm with our state legislators. This whole concept of nickel and diming, give me a break. That's all we've been doing. We've been nickel and diming our language for the last 3-4 weeks. It should have been done 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, you say that, but no other districts. I guess maybe a few other districts have done it, Brandon. Orange has not done it. Orange declared impasse. I know Hillsborough hasn't. Palm Beach hasn't. Miami-Dade hasn't. Broward hasn't. So
if
I mean,
we're
you say that it should be done
if we're
a
going
few
to
weeks
begin to
ago.
interrupt each
So,
other after we got an email about respect earlier today, I don't even know what we're doing. Okay. We don't need to constantly be dismissive. We're better than.
are we?
Or we should be. I am.
Really?
Yes. But this whole idea of, well, we're flexible with teachers' times, we let them come in late in the meeting. These people in Polk have always given Polk more than Polk has given them. So yeah, if I need to come in 15 minutes late because I have given weeks of my life extra to this district, my principal lets me do that because they see that the taxpayers are always in the plus when they make these arrangements. So I think we need to be very, very careful about how we're talking to people and how we're treating them, because the people in the schools are getting destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. I spent an hour last night just trying to convince someone not to fit today. We're ready to go. We're not ready to be dismissed, we're ready to be heard. And maybe we can talk about things, but we're not going to be dismissed, we're not going to be belittled. We're done with that.
Well, if I may, Brandon, I appreciate the fact that you're passionate about that we should treat everybody with dignity and respect, because we absolutely should. And when we say Polk, we need to realize we're saying we are Polk because everybody is feeling it. And we're all working together in lockstep and working through probably the most challenging time we've seen in this nation in a long time. And so I agree that we need to understand how everyone feels. And so it's not a us and them, it's a we. And as principals, as a principal, a former principal, I can tell you that we move mountains for our teachers, and you know it, and they move mountains for us because it's a relationship piece. And you know what? If I can flex you sometime, I'm going to flex you sometime. If you're doing, we're going to do whatever we can. But we don't influence the state. We've been working. You've been working. Others have been working. We have what we have, and we're all doing our best. And so I don't think anybody's trying to be dismissive or inconsiderate. We certainly appreciate everything that everybody's bringing to the table and everything that everybody's doing. We understand that. And if we had it, we absolutely would give it. You know, I heard Tedra say that. If we had it, we'd give it. Principals, district folks would love nothing more than to see you paid well, extremely well, for what we bring to the table as educators, what you bring to the table as educators, what you do for children and for our society. We are all on the same page with that. But what I believe they're saying is, hey, you know, we're just going to have to work together to try to make the best of it. We're going to have to show some trust with one another, and we're going to try to do our best to do what we can to help each other. You're talking folks off the ledge. We're talking folks off the ledge. Everybody's working together in that. So I think that's important to remember that it's not, we are Polk. We are Polk.
Well, I'm just going to say, I think it matters how we say it and how we phrase it. That's what gets me hot and passionate. It's how we say it. People are busting their butts. I've said administrators are busting their butts. I do not want to be an administrator. That is not a job I want anymore.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, with this piece of language for the compensation piece, is that if at the end of the day, the principal has done everything that they can to flex time, to be creative in working with the 360, and it's still, the job still cannot be done, and he or she still needs supervision, that this allows them a way to get that supervision without taking advantage of people's goodwill on a consistent basis. And so really, at least in my opinion, if I were a principal, this would be a last resort. Because I'm working to flex hours if I need to. I'm working to be creative with my 360. I'm telling people, hey, you're going to come in, maybe 10 minutes later and leave 10 minutes later. I've done everything I can, but I'm still coming up short. But this language gives site-based principals some flexibility there without railroading our staff.
That's a strong term, railroading. That is a strong, and that's the kind of stuff Brandon just talked about. It's how we say it and what we say. We don't have principals railroading. We don't railroad people. We work together collaboratively to get the job done, and then we do everything in our power to compensate to the best of our ability with what we can give. And so there's a lot of, when you go to the school sites, you walk campuses, and you listen to the dialogue and you watch the interactions, they're all working together to get it done. I've been on Brandon's campus this year. I've seen the positive dynamic and the energy that they're all pulling together to get it done. So I would caution us to use your own words, Brandon. It's what we say and how we say it. So I would caution us not to use inflammatory language.
It's the year of the whistleblower, remember? So.
Are there any other, you mentioned flex time?
Can you say that louder, Tedra? We didn't hear you.
I think that's
all right. How's that? Does that work? So we mentioned flex time, we mentioned compensation at the hourly rate. Are there other forms of incentives or compensations? For example, I'm not use that word, but like a day off or vacation or something to kind of recognize that we are all working together, right? So maybe perhaps the compensation may not be there. I don't know that. I haven't looked at any finances, but maybe an extra a day off, or in terms of a vacation or what have you. But these are unusual times, and you do have faculty working well with principals, doing the very best they can. But at some point, after the principal has done everything she can possibly do, worked every angle to try and get it remedied, and you have faculty that have done the same, then I think it's okay to say, again, just if I'm going to believe Mike, right, the money's just not there. The tsunami's coming next semester, but there's nothing that says we can, at the very least, say, credit that faculty with an extra day off or vacation. So I'm just putting it out there because we should recognize that everyone's trying their very best. And I think that if that threshold is crossed, because the way, again, I'm reading this language, is that the principal seems to be the one that makes the call that in the event, I don't think that the faculty is in a position to make that call. It feels like the principal makes the call, and if she makes that call, then she ought to be able to say, here's an extra day off or vacation day or what have you. Again, I'm just kind of trying to figure out there are other forms of compensation to recognize that this language. Okay, I'm done.
I appreciate what you said, Wilfredo. I do believe that there should be some recognition. And so I'm not disputing that. I'm saying that we can't pay for that recognition knowing what is coming. And given that, I'm looking at the calendar. I don't know that we could give days off per se. But what I think we can do is look at comping sometimes specifically during our looking to find what our days are. I think that would be a reasonable solution to this. And I think that would be a fair solution. If in the event, and I also believe we need to make sure that the language says exactly what we intend for it to say. And I don't think it does that. And so two separate items, but I'm looking at the calendar. Can you put the calendar up there? Is that a way for you to do that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What'd you say?
I'll keep trying.
No. So in looking at the calendar, let's just go through the days to see what days can be provided as comp days or comp time. So we are now September 2nd. We're looking at Labor Day on Monday, next Monday. Interim reports, FTE, first week, teacher workday. So teachers earn that. So we do have some time in that. Administrators have time in the teacher workdays. Do we want to offer, and that may be something that I'll talk to my team about, do we want to offer some of that time from the 60 minutes that they have there to then have them work back in their classrooms? That's one option. We still could also do some flex time to allow them to come in late as well. So grades, holiday, distribute report cards, interim report cards, the last day before winter break. Holiday, spring break. Oh yeah, we need the March date. For testing, yeah. So that's what I would propose, actually, is one, have on our teacher work days that are throughout the year currently, let's go ahead and have our administrators work with our teachers to provide flex time during that time. That is 90 minutes or 60 minutes that they currently own. And so I think our administrators would be willing to provide some flexibility there in order to get some of the days covered. Or even on early release days, because we do have the 6 early release days or the 5 early release days, absent the March 10th date. So maybe that would be a better one than the teacher work days, because you have more early dismissal days, because you generally have one every month. That will allow for them to give up that time. What do you all think?
Could they record that comp time, flex time, whatever we're going to call it, and could it roll over into next year too?
Not into 2021, or
like if they don't use up their comp time.
Into
Like if we're
21,
treating
22?
this like as comp time, right? So like if I stay after
So it ends, it doesn't roll.
I'm saying, could we have it to where their comp time could be used next year too if it's not used up?
Into 21, 22. No, it would be a different pay cycle.
But it's flex time, like, so it's not like it's that we're.
So I would still say no, because what if, one, you change schools, but then two, what if our administrators change schools? So there would be no way you couldn't come to me if you were at Laura's school previously, or Laura was the administrator, I'm now the new administrator, say, hey, Tadra, got cash in my comp. That wouldn't, I think that would be putting, I personally believe that would be putting a bad taste in the mouth of both the teacher and the principal.
Yeah, because the agreement for flex time was between Tony
That
Kirk and
person.
Tedra Porteous.
Correct.
And so when Mike Carone becomes the new principal, and I still have 10 hours of flex time that I'd like to use, then Mike Carone's going to say, well, listen, that wasn't an agreement that you and I made. That was an agreement between you and Mrs. Porteous. I'm not going to honor that. And so then that's going to irritate the teacher, because they had given up their time and now they can't use it. And flex time has no money tied to it. It's merely, it's a type of time that you're going to use relatively quickly. Like say, for instance, I worked 15 minutes today, then ideally what I want to do is I want to get that flex time out in the next couple of days so that someone doesn't forget about it, because it's really not documented anywhere other than up here and maybe on a sheet of paper someplace or something of that nature. Whereas compensatory time, comp time, most normally has a dollar figure tied to it, either your hourly rate and then half of that. So like if I worked 15 minutes over, comp time would be 30 minutes. And then there's a tracking mechanism for that. And if we're going to start talking about comp time and tying money to it, then that's probably something that we would want to negotiate.
I guess I'll talk to the team about it and see where we land on that. But my one concern is if this is happening consistently every day and somebody's staying after 20, 30 minutes every day past their duty time, no amount of flex time is going to make up for that time.
And you're talking specifically about somebody that hasn't volunteered to do that.
Yeah.
You're talking about somebody that
is being made to stay because, let's say, kids are having to sit in their classrooms, particularly at elementary. We haven't heard too much of an issue at the high schools, really. But particularly at elementary, if they're trying to social distance and they're releasing bus numbers, a teacher's in there with those students, possibly 20, 30, even last week, 40, 50 minutes past their duty time because there's nowhere else for those kids to go. The teacher's not just going to leave them, right? And so I guess they could walk them to the office and drop them off there, but that's not a consistent, appropriate solution either.
If I can kind of speak to it a little bit. So I spent 11 years in elementary school, so quite a few years as an AP and a teacher in elementary school. Done a lot of different backgrounds, middle school, high school level as well. First week of school is bad. Everybody knows. First week of school, as a middle school person, you're going to stay till by 6, 7 o'clock at night waiting, sometimes on buses. That's just what happens first week of school. As it gets better, as the weeks go on, it gets shorter and shorter to that. Okay, so I think right now we're focusing on the first week of school. And even in normal years, it's lean, right? Let alone all the stuff we got going on right now, just trying to mandate, help with everybody with social distancing. I'm sure majority of administration in the county with teachers and do what they need to do, help them out. I know currently at Auburn High School, there's a lot of days, hey, well, if we have our meeting, I'm good. I know you guys put in more time. If you need to work from home, I'm sure that happens at a lot of places. We know we try to help the teachers out many a times with when they stay late for certain things. Just trying to honor their time and help them. But when you start talking about flex time, somebody has to, who's going to keep track of marking that time? The principal. But your principal's going to have to do that one. There's no way, am I going to have a teacher come up to me and say, hey, I stayed late yesterday because I think you needed this.
because in the event, in terms of the event that you have to, and that's not up to the faculty, that's up to the principal. So the principal doesn't have to, because if the principal doesn't trust, like Tony was saying, and the principal happens to move, right, the staff would be upset and saying, hey, I gave up a lot of my time with the understanding of the previous principal. The newcomer is fully entitled to say, I got nothing in writing. So we recognize what you're saying. The issue here is in the event that it occurs, we agree that everyone's working hard. You try everything in the book that you can to make it happen. You can't. So you're down to one thing only. You have a teacher who's consistently volunteering, working with you. He should be compensated in some form. Now, we know that the money's not possible. Fine. And we know that they're going to do something on the table. We want to consider that. It should be, what's the word? I say compensated, but for lack of a better word, they should be compensated. I don't know what word I used before. What was it?
Flex time.
They should be flex time.
Acknowledged.
I've heard what you're saying, and we understand, but what I'm saying is as an administrator with 140, 150 staff members, okay, there has to be some sort of, it has to be planned ahead of time. It can't be, hey, something came up yesterday and I knew you needed help, so I decided to stay. Because that might not be what I did. You might have thought that's what I did, and that's fine. But I know a lot of times on these days, on teacher work days, even the Friday of teacher work day at the beginning of this year, hey, when you're good, go home and rest. I'm good. I know you're going to put 4 hours in next week. We're good. And that's what the majority of administration does, because we know everybody puts more time than what they're paid for. We understand that. We all have done it. But it's very difficult to start tracking stuff, because then you have to have a secretary putting time in for tracking. There has to be a whole other tracking system with flex time when you start doing that. We currently do it a lot with County House during the summer, coming in and working. And just trying to keep up with them sometimes it's difficult, let alone the 150 staff members of what we got going on. So, we understand everybody puts more time in than what happens. We're with you.
I think that if the principal, if that is happening,
If that's what's happening, I think it behooves the principal to take a look at it and say, where's the problem here? I got a situation here that leads to a consistent of folks working outside of 360. What's going on? I mean, that's, I think, what the principal should be looking at, and then attempt to fix it, and then seek assistance from administration if it's beyond the scope of his or her ability to fix. But once you have an event that the principal determines you need someone there, upon mutual agreement, I think there's nothing wrong with considering what Tedra put on the table. I mean, if someone needs to track it, yeah, it would be the principal. It is what it is. It would be the principal to say, okay, if you see that you have a constant problem with that issue, I would encourage you to take a look at it, because something's wrong.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to get at here. And the crux of the issue is that in the event that more supervision is needed, it's not Stephanie as a teacher saying that Ty needs more help. It's Ty looking at the situation and saying, well, here we're consistently over here. X, Y, and Z bus is consistently late. We need a few extra bodies that you don't have. And so that would be triggered by you, the administrator, and then you coming to me and saying, or even just to your staff saying, hey, I need some people. Like, this is the situation. I need 3 people every day because this just isn't working. And so by mutual agreement, I can say, okay, I can help. We've agreed now. And I think that's where what Tedra had put on the table, and even what we had put on the table, even though it was money, that's where that would trigger in. It wouldn't be me just volunteering to help you out because I want to. It would be you looking at your situation and saying, this is where we have a problem. This is where I need help. And then you would ask for volunteers, and then those people would be compensated either through flex time, like Tedra had put on the table. We had said regular hourly rate of pay, but something to give those folks that are working outside of their duty day for supervision purposes. Not because I need to stay and make copies or because I want to stay and work on lesson plans, right? Everybody does that. A majority of the people do that. But if you need specific help with supervision, that's really what this is for. And we know that's happening. We know, especially in our elementary schools, they're having a lot of trouble with this. And principals have been creative, and they have moved schedules around for people to start later or end later or come earlier and leave earlier. But even then, there's a limit to what you can do with that. And so once you've reached that limit of all possibilities, you might need to look at people saying after their duty time. And by mutual agreement, you know, if you know what your situation is, and it may not be every school. You may have 10, 15, 20 schools that really have to do this depending on their situation. And so that's where this needs to, that's where this language would be applicable here. I mean, and I still think that that's exactly what the CARES Act money was for, is for things like this. Because really, I think it's gonna, I mean, if the principal is truly doing everything that they need to do and they're the ones triggering this, it's gonna be not very many people, but it's still giving those people compensation, whether it's flex time or their regular hourly rate of pay, if there truly needs to be more supervision at that school in those times for bus or morning or whatever. And that's really that's what this language is getting at, is that after everything has been exhausted, we're trying to give site-based administrators some flexibility here to provide adequate supervision.
So let's do this to keep the flow going. I'm looking at what you all emailed me, or what you emailed me. I see that we still have substitute teachers to discuss. Mm-hmm. And then Linda's here. So I want to make sure that we allow her to speak about the FFCRA and the admin leave. But I think we need to table this. I'll propose some language. Let me look at what other districts are doing, because my contacts in Palm Beach and Orange are telling me that they didn't agree to any of this in their and anti compensation to it in their duties. So in their length of workday, I guess. I looked at Pinellas. I didn't see anything in Pinellas either. So I'm a bit concerned about that as well. So let me do some research on it. What I will do is propose new language to you via email on this piece. So I see the next one.
We would have the same conversation with duty-free lunch then. I mean, we would go around with the same conversation with duty-free lunch then.
Okay.
So propose some language and send it over, and then we can talk about it.
Okay. So what else?
So
substitute teachers. Well, that's the one I have, the substitute teachers, and the one that you sent on Monday.
Yes. Well, I guess just going in order just to make sure we're good. For lesson plans, that was your language, and obviously we're good with that for the CBA. And then substitute teachers. And so we just really had a question about 9A. So if you're splitting classes in the event that you can't get a sub, how are you maintaining social distancing that way? Do you guys have protocols in place for that?
So I don't know that classes are being split, excuse me.
We
balancing that.
We haven't split classes. We haven't had to, and there's been several days we haven't had subs. We pulled paras. I've had deans in rooms. Had different. I mean, we've all kind of just taken spots, helped out, done what we have to do. There's no way to combine classes.
Correct.
Just what wouldn't happen with it. So I think the majority of schools, there's all hands on deck. You know, guidance counselors might be asked to go cover a period, and we'll just each take a period and go with it. And that's what we were doing at Auburndale. I mean, I would imagine most schools are not combining. I don't know how you would combine unless you could go into a big room and separate everybody out, but that's still it's difficult.
Well, that was just our question. We weren't quite sure what you meant by balancing to maintain social distancing. And so we wanted some clarification on that from your language. And we thought that it meant splitting classes because that's what would typically happen, as a last resort, but we weren't sure. So we wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Okay. So then we're okay with 9A. And then 9B was our original language, additional added language after August 10th. And then it was in the merged document. And so we had it back for discussion as well. Now, if you're not getting a Kelly sub, right, and that's because this would be triggered if a para is going into sub and there's an unfilled job number, right? And so if you're not able to get a Kelly sub, you're already saving, $90, $120, depending on their qualifications. And so with putting paras at either an increased risk of exposure, depending on what their job assignment is, or if you're having them sub in e-school or blended learning, they're kind of being asked to do way more than they normally would do in a subbing situation. And so we thought that should mirror some additional money, because you're still saving money by not paying a Kelly sub. And so we wanted some of that savings to go back to our para educators. And this again would be if they had an unfilled job number, because we would have normally charged Kelly. And so we wanted some of that money to get back to our paras.
So the proposal is to increase it from $20 a day
to 30 for face-to-face.
To $30 a full day and $15 for a half day.
And then if they're doing an e-campus assignment substitute, 40 and 20, and then a blended 50 and 25. And again, you're still saving money because you're not paying a Kelly sub. And we're giving some of the savings to our paras who are having to do more work than normal subbing situations. So there shouldn't be any additional money, because if it's an unfilled job number, you would have been paying the Kelly sub anyway. But now
So tell me why there's a difference between face-to-face and pure e-campus.
Well, we figured with the technology that the para would need to have more training for the e-school. It's something that they're not normally asked to do. So if they're facilitating an e-school subbing, we thought that would be more compensation for them.
And then the blended is
because they're having to
$50?
juggle face-to-face and blended at the same time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Pure campus e-school?
So if a teacher has all campus e-school.
100% kids?
Yeah.
That are not there?
That are not there.
I thought we weren't having those classes.
So we're not, okay, so we can take that off if.
Yeah, actually our administrators are covering those. So we can't give rights in school to someone else. So we've given the rights to the administrators. And so the administrators have to work to cover that.
Yeah, the hundreds of emails that we got like today that just come through just because a kid submitting a class, that's kind of why. So they wouldn't even have access to that particular account. So when it goes to the blended part, they wouldn't have access to that account either. So when I read this, the way I understand it is just the face-to-face.
So then they would only be subbing in a face-to-face situation then?
Yeah, I don't think the differentiation between the models is relevant to how it's having to work.
Right.
Well, I guess when we were thinking about this, we were thinking that they would also be responsible for work for the e-school side, but if they're not, We still think that they should increase their money because they're putting out the exposure side. They're getting more exposure than they normally would in their position regularly. But again, you're still saving a lot of money by not having a Kelly sub there. And so even if you increase it to what we had proposed to the face-to-face model, $30 a day, 15 for the half day, you're still coming out much better by if you couldn't get a Kelly sub. And then that kind of helps mitigate some of their exposure risk.
So I actually would agree that it does end up being cheaper for the district to pay that. Mark, what are your thoughts?
So it's just the 30 and 50 that you're talking about, and the 15 and the 25.
It's not even the 30 and the 50, just the 30. Is it the 52? Did I hear?
Oh, did you said.
Well, they said with blended, because they wouldn't be responsible for, they wouldn't be responsible for the blended learning.
We would have to log, as administrators, we log in and send stuff to the kids.
No, so Rob's people, remember Rob's people are just monitoring.
Yeah.
So you're not doing anything, you're just monitoring. If you, not Rob's people, transportation employees would only be monitoring. Would only be monitoring, that's it. They're not doing anything. The difference here is, and I don't think you were here earlier, the difference here is parents that are asked to sub when a Kelly sub doesn't pick up the day or the assignment, then they actually have to do instruction. Whereas transportation employees don't have to do instruction, it's simply monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say one thing about the language. Due to increased risk of COVID exposure, at least from my vantage point, most of the paras are just as exposed as anyone else. So just acknowledging that some of them are, I don't know that that's necessarily true, because many of them are in the classroom all day long anyway, or, working in that, I get what we're saying about the added compensation. I just don't know if the why is totally accurate.
Okay. Oh, I'm okay with taking out that clause. If we can, if we do agree with the increase in pay for them to sub, since you're still saving money.
I'll be very clear that it would be for unfilled substitute assignment.
I mean, that's the way it currently works now, because if they're not provided a job number,
right, I
they
just want
can
to make sure
refuse
that
a sub job with their current language.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear compared to the monitoring that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
So it would be specifically for unfilled substitute job comparatively to the monitoring.
Yeah,
so monitoring,
we can add that in. I'm fine with that, because that's in line with their current CBA language.
Okay. No, actually, you can keep the whole first sentence. Paraeducators may be assigned.
Just reference the article.
It was the however due to add it, or due, no, you're fine. You erase the COVID exposure. So.
Unerase the whole thing.
Right, but you don't want any sentence.
No. Listen to me. Unerase the whole thing.
Yes.
So back. Undo. Go up to the top where the save button is, right there. Yeah. Click it. If you do the drop down, that may help too. You can't unstrike that.
Well, I'm sorry.
Unstrike B? That's what I'm asking.
Reject.
Yeah, good. Okay, so the only thing, paraeducators may be assigned to, you see that first sentence, to an unfilled absence. No, an unfilled, okay, teacher absence, thank you. And assigned to an unfilled teacher absence per the collective bargaining agreement. And then do however, erase from however to load. Oh, paraeducators may be assigned to an unfilled teacher absence as a substitute teacher. Per the collective bargaining agreement, yep.
And then I would just get rid, because it's all face to face.
Right.
So I would just have.
You can even get rid of one.
30, yeah. At $30 for a full day and $15 for a half day.
Backspace some more. You can't take it all the way up to a year. And then get rid of the and, period. And semicolon, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So I think you're already doing number 10. So that was our language. So if you're okay with keeping that in, we're good. We're good with C. And the green.
All the way down?
Yeah, you can get rid of the blue. We're good with D. We had already talked about that. And then we'll revisit duty free lunch, but it can go away from that section. So with E, if we're okay with your deleted part, and then we're okay with that if you're okay with it. So we're okay with instructor. We're okay with F, but I think it should be 15.10 is the article, not 15.9. Yeah, right there. It should be 15.10. And then we're okay with your duration.
One of the other things, oh, I'm sorry. You gonna check it? Okay. One of the other things we wanted to chit chat with you about briefly is, the calendar. So we looked at our dates, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. What we were thinking about is, I know that we had talked about it in an earlier bargaining session. So we know that now other districts have done the 180 and the state has, less than 180 and the state has accepted it. So currently our calendar ends on the 9th and the 10th. What we were thinking about doing is doing 176, is that right? 176, that would end on, last student day would be the 3rd? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and then the last teacher day would be the 4th.
And so they would still get paid for that time on the back end because we weren't able to bring them back on the front end.
Everything would still be the same.
Okay.
Would just be work days for those. Non-work days, paid non-work days?
Yep. But it wouldn't have to be in the calendar per se.
Yeah, so they would still get paid through June 10th.
So their pay wouldn't change.
Yeah, the pay
So they'll
wouldn't
continue to be paid
Okay.
throughout the year, in terms of being paid through June 30th. So they'll continue to do that,
Yeah.
but it just won't be additional or less.
Yeah, it was just, I know we had to walk through some people, they were confused about how payroll did it with the holdback advance, but it was just because you can't pay them for time that they haven't worked yet. And so they're technically getting paid for that time on the back end now, even before this change. I'm fine with it. We're fine with this change to June 3rd, with the last working day being June 4th. Yeah, we're good with that calendar change.
Maybe our CBA numbers aren't the same, but I was referencing cold work before I came up with
That's what I was, and I thought I saw it was 15.10.
1510 is the fuel cost.
Highlight it. I'll look at it. I'll look at it tomorrow and just make sure. But we're okay with it. I just wanted the right article reference, so I'll go back and look at that. So I believe the few sticking points we still have are under safety protocols A, the 6C, talking about the employee screening and the admin leave and whatnot, which was why Linda's here. And then really just the additional supervision piece, which rolls into duty-free lunch. I think those are the only two things that are.
So I'll try to get you something for Wednesday. I'll try to get you something by Friday, close of business. No later than Monday, so you can review it.
Okay.
Talk with your team about it. Friday would be ideal, so then.
Okay.
So I'll try to get you something by Friday, no later than close of business.
And I know with next Wednesday is the insurance committee, which I know I'm wrapped up in, and so is some of my team. And so since we're pretty close with this, I think we can finish this up, and then we'll just publicize the changes.
Okay.
Because we only have two things that are still outstanding here.
Right.
And so, did Linda want to speak to the?
Linda, if you can, did you join the meeting?
Yes. Yes, I did.
So earlier, okay, so earlier we were having some discussion about if a teacher or a staff member goes off on sick leave, if they are exposed, and then they have to be quarantined per the Department of Health and or our protocol, then what happens in terms of them using admin leave and or FFCRA and or sick leave?
Okay, well, the first thing that would happen if they can work remote, we typically are offering that for them in the event of exposure, which means they would fill out the form, but they pretty much would work from home. So, and I think you talked about we're trying to use a new code for that to mark that in the system. So we're doing, we're using professional development code for lack of another code until we work out a payroll situation for that. Now, if they can't work from home, then we now have, the essential, the critical infrastructure. So there's a number of questions with that, depending upon the exposure, depending upon if the employee feels safe, depending upon also, to be honest, the employee's underlying conditions, how safe they feel. If it was a brief exposure, they're probably good to mask up and stay at work. And, obviously if we can remote with that too, we probably would, that would be the first preference. But I'm hoping now with the critical infrastructure that will minimize the useless, I want to say useless because there's a purpose for that in the public health arena, but it will allow us to continue to have people that want to work and feel comfortable to continue to work. What that would do basically is they quarantine, but they are released to work, but only work. So basically you continue to quarantine at home, isolate. There's additional monitoring that goes on, temperature 3 to 4 times a day. Any little symptom, you call attention to that rather than just, oh, maybe it's just my allergies. No, if I've been exposed, then I really should isolate. And that's going to change because then there's symptomatic. Symptomatic is quarantined, no question. So again, try to remote work if possible. So what we're trying to do is preserve the FFCRA, the 10 days of emergency sick pay now, it won't be as necessary, hopefully, with some of the exposures. Now, there will be exceptions, because we've had quite a few people, as you know, that have been exposed and have been fine over that 14 days, asymptomatic, but have had to use the 10 days. So we're hoping that won't happen now. So if they use the FFCRA leave and they're still having to be out, then the current practice is, yes, they have to use any sick leave that they would have remaining. Also consider that they may have short-term disability that may apply as well. If they purchased disability insurance, the contracting of COVID could be, and again, it's contracting it, so that would be, they do have a condition and they can't work, then they would have a valid claim with the carrier. So they would get paid in that case by the insurance. The other option would be sick leave bank. We have had a few catastrophic illnesses that have resulted, unfortunately, in hospitalization. Those would be eligible probably if they were hospitalized and, God forbid, had to go on a ventilator. That would be eligible for sick leave bank if they're enrolled. So there are these other resources that are available too as well, other than having to use their own sick time. We also have, the board has approved a leave donation program that we still are lagging behind. I did get new staff authorization, but I have to ask permission to post. As you know, we have a freeze, but I have a lot of programming to do to actually roll that out. But the board has authorized leave donation between members. So that's another possibility for employees. So that's what we've done. And also FMLA is eligible also to protect their job in that time period. It doesn't pay them. So I've talked about the forms of payment first. And then the Americans with Disabilities Act, is also may come into play for them as well. So that's kind of the list here of that. We currently, to be honest, I know some other districts have looked at administrative leave. Some have picked it based on where was your exposure. To be honest, that's kind of hard, right? How do you isolate that? Sometimes we don't know if it was outside of work or if it was at work. So some have said they're only going to offer that if they're exposed at the district. Well, that's kind of hard to prove. So, we have not, we think, to be honest, with all the programs we have available, including the leave donation, to be honest, I don't see a need for additional administrative leave. But that's my personal opinion with everything that we've had in place.
Okay, and then.
For whatever reason, my emergency has been exhausted essentially. And then, if I.
Stephanie, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was talking that one, didn't see you guys. And so with the health screening form that everybody's filling out every day, if I have symptoms and I'm directed to stay home until I go see my doctor, which I should be going to see my doctor that day, right?
Correct. And a lot of times, keep in mind now, it's a telehealth appointment, even whether it's in our health center or in the community, because nobody wants potential COVID people in the office. So usually it's a phone call. And depending upon the capacity, usually that's able to happen the same day.
And I guess there though, where we're coming from is I shouldn't have to take a sick day for that day. Like if I truly am exhibiting symptoms, I want to be honest on that on that sheet, because we do not want super spreaders. School's already a super spreader situation. And so we want people to feel like they can be honest on that sheet. And so if I do have symptoms, I would then be expected to do teledoc or go see my doctor or whatever the case is going to be for me, to either say, no, Stephanie, we did a rapid test, you don't have COVID, or you might have COVID, and then that triggers the exposure form, right? And
and also keep in mind too, with testing now, our turnaround is much quicker. We do have like a 2 to 3 day turnaround too. We also have dedicated testing. So you call now and you register that you're an employee, and we have access to those results typically in 48 hours.
And so I guess where we were coming from with this is that an employee should not have to take their sick time if they're getting checked out by their doctor, because we want them to be honest on this sheet. We do not want them coming to work because they either don't have any Like Althea was a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she had her hip replaced. She exhausted all of her sick leave.
Correct.
It wasn't that she's mismanaged her sick leave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she truly used it for when she needed it.
Yeah.
And we don't want there to be a situation where somebody's close to getting their leave gone for whatever reason, and then not truly reporting what their symptoms are because they don't want to go into an unpaid day and whatnot. So we really felt that it was almost like a fitness for duty situation. If they're being told to stay home because they need to go get checked out by their doctor and get a doctor's note to come back, either that they're COVID free or they don't have symptoms.
Okay, well, let me correct one thing there. We're not requiring a doctor's note unless there's symptoms. And you're correct. I mean, if you call that very day and you're convinced based on your medical provider and you talking that you're okay, then that's one day you've used. Now, yes, you know, we could use it as exposure day. You can decide I don't want to use it as exposure day. But my hope is by now the mission critical and the other things that we put into place, Stephanie, I think with the leave donation, I think that these employees have shown they're very generous with leave. If they have a concern that this is the third time they've been out, you know, then we can handle that, and their other employees can step up and help cover that. So I guess what I'm saying is I just don't see the need for additional administrative leave. I think with the additional pieces we have in place, I think we have a very small or zero chance now of people exhausting that. Keep in mind, these 2 weeks are only good through the end of December. You all know, depending on what happens with the election, depending on what happens at the end of the year with COVID in general, Congress could authorize additional days. So that is still a possibility, depending on where the pandemic is. So, you know, so that's truly just through the end of the year right now.
Okay, but Linda.
I could point out just real quickly, just to kind of give everyone just a basic definition. We don't want to use fitness for duty, I don't think, in a particular set of circumstances.
We can't hear you.
Examination confirms that the employee is physically and or psychologically safely performs the current role. These specialized exams are typically reserved for more labor-intensive roles, and the exams are unique to each employer and their position. So I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think we want to use the term fitness for duty, nor do we want to utilize admin leave in this particular regard now, because this isn't something that we're ordering for the employee.
Well, but if they check yes to any symptoms, you're telling them to not come to work.
I'm telling them that day to check in with their provider. They could be back the very next morning is my point.
Well, I guess that's where I would say that if
and I'm assuming there's no exposure, okay? Because it does depend on exposure and that perfect combination of things, because if there's been an exposure, if we have underlying conditions, so there's a lot of myriad of things that are involved in that discussion. So it's unfortunately, we're not able to blanket some rules for that because it is so situational.
But Linda, I have a question for you too also, because my going out into as many schools as I go in, I could be in five schools in 1 week if I'm doing elementary schools.
Yep.
Okay, so my exposure to this is happening. And then we also had, which I found out, we've had a school that they just had a positive test result at Boone Middle School, that one of the technicians from the EERS had been at that school. So we're not getting notifications, itinerant staff, when things happen at the schools. We are in these schools. We are in and out of, for myself, I am in and out of every building that is on that campus.
And I certainly understand your concern, Althea. I totally understand that. I know we provided additional PPE, and I know you're very careful. You know, we provided gloves and hand sanitizer, and I know you're very careful with what you're doing. I also, as far as the itinerant people that may be dropping into the facility, I had that question because I had other employees too, like network people that are in and out of schools. It really depends upon, now that the district is posting that information on the website, it really depends. That could have been in the classroom in a whole nother building than where the employee was. It could have been in the same building, but in a totally different class. You got to keep in mind the close contact rule, okay, that you have to be like in proximity with that person, and usually much longer than 15 minutes. Even with a mask on, you could still be exposed, but it's got to be a close contact. So usually the only time you're going to get an individual call, if you get an individual call from an 863 number or a Tallahassee phone number, and it's a department health, you need to pay attention, because that means there indeed has been a close contact, and you may not even know who that person is. You may not remember that situation. So close contact is the difference. And I agree with you, it's frustrating because you get a little scared, right? Because it's in the same school and you were thinking, I was in that school, and you wonder who it is. We can't tell you who it is. But the idea behind the close contact and what's happening between Mark Wilcox and the Department of Health is that is then happening when that positive is concerned, all that is being collected and then distributed out. And what I told this department, and I would tell you the same thing, is monitoring and knowing, looking at those results, watching the news results, those are released, where we had a positive, start thinking, you just really have to be careful with yourself. We all have to be vigilant right now, especially those of us that have underlying conditions.
But again, I worked closely with the network manager. I told you about the network manager that died in June. We worked side by side in May.
Yeah. And there's no rhyme or reason with this virus. We do know that a lot of people that are getting really seriously ill do have, we know which conditions are a more severe risk. And, people that have those conditions, and a lot of us do, I pay the health claims, so I know a great part of our population has those conditions. So it's just important to be vigilant, I think, and do what we know to do, the washing of hands, the social distancing, making sure that we're not being close, and if we are being close, we're limiting it. We're trying to be sure we're masked, and we're not, we're washing our hands, and to be honest, I mean, that's the best defense we have right now. A lot of us in this room have had close exposures. I've had one. I was fine, and I was pretty confident I was, but I was doing what I knew to do. I was social distancing. I was making sure I had a mask on. I was making sure, even in that room, that I was okay. And it was scary, but I kind of monitored, and I thought, well, maybe, but I have other things that could cause the same symptoms, right? So, but I felt comfortable I was okay, but because of my work environment and wanting to protect my fellow employees, I did work from home during that time.
But I don't have that luxury.
I understand.
My job is, so I am one of those ones where Tony said, fit for duty.
Yeah.
Okay, so
the fit for duty, the other problem with the fit for duty is there's a provision in there that you all added last year that says we can't use the health center doctors there. And a lot of employees are availing themselves of the health center right now for COVID. So that's the other connotation I saw with that I had a little bit of heartburn over, because a lot of employees are getting involved actively in their health right now and are finding a good experience at the health center and are using that more to follow up with their care. So I wanted to make sure we don't restrict that by using that language. But Althea, I totally agree. But in your case, I still think if we had a situation, there would still be other benefits available for you that would be sufficient to make sure you were paid. I guess that's what I'm saying here. I think with the leave donation, especially, that was just approved this summer, we went through a lot of work to get that done. We still have some work to do with programming, but that's a wonderful benefit, and you'll get 100% of your pay, and you could still be out on FMLA during that time. So you still have job protections.
Okay. I have a question and a comment. This is DJ Ross. I'm the lead for the occupational and physical therapists in the district. And a couple of things come to mind is that we do work very closely to the students, transferring them, you're touching them. We've got PPE that's been provided for us. But one of the concerns I have is that we are not at those schools every day. at its same school. And so I may be at one school today, but not be there for another week or maybe 2 weeks, depending on the services of the students at that school that require that physical therapy assistance. So how can we assure that on that day, such as today, when a case was listed on the website for Winter Haven High School, and if I had been at that school in that classroom, how does anyone know that? We need to develop a type of tracking system for itinerant people that travel multiple schools in a day, multiple schools every week, and in several classrooms at a school, so that people know we were in that room and there has been a positive case of COVID. That's my first thing. My second thing is I want to propose or talk about, in our situation, why is it not being considered that some people can work a hybrid caseload or work service type when we are, like I said, in multiple schools in a day, serving students face to face, very close with our PPE. And then when we're done with face-to-face services, go to a remote location to work on our documentation, our evaluations, writing up updates, etc., and or working with e-students on Zoom through Schoology, so that we are decreasing our chance of exposure and our chance of giving, if we have been exposed, transferring it other places. And oftentimes we're in an office with 5 or 6 other people, and if we've been exposed and don't know, and then the next day we're told that where we were at, we were exposed, and then the people in our office that we share as itinerant folks then have to be aware of that and possibly look at where all they have been. So the two things that I am concerned about is schools being able to notify itinerant people when they possibly have been exposed, they've been in a classroom that has been quarantined, and they could be notified that they were in there. And is there a possibility for itinerant people to be hybrid, in meaning being face-to-face, but when they're done with seeing the students face-to-face, work remotely, not necessarily at a school site, to get the other work completed? Thank you.
Hi, DJ. I can address the first part about our itinerant staff. I know in my area, I have a lot of those people that work in that regard. And so just earlier this week with Mr. Hill and some others, we're reiterating to everybody to make sure you're signing in and out in the office so that we can track where you've been. And then our pandemic response people at the school have also been given directives that as they're working with the health department, with Linda's team, et cetera, that one of the first things they need to do is to review the sign in, sign out sheets. And then if there's a possibility that you've been on a campus case at a particular time, even if you didn't list on the sign-in sheet every room you were in, that pandemic coordinator at the school could at least reach out to you and ask you those questions to collect that information, then to give over to the Department of Health for contact tracing. So we do have a process in place for that. I know I sent something out to my division this week, just reminding them, please, please, please make sure you are signing in and out everywhere we go. I know sometimes we just get comfortable with our routine, but that is critically important so that we can follow up on that contact tracing. As far as the second part with when you're working with your different students, we probably have to look at that with your direct supervisor, with your how that might look, is meeting the needs of your students. That's kind of what's, in my opinion, what some of our teachers are doing when they have a blended class, and might be doing that. I know some of our teachers may have a period that they just work on with eSchool, and so I think those are things that are best worked out with your direct supervisor if you're still kind of meeting the needs of all your students that you serve. So just wanted to especially touch on that piece about signing in, because it is critically important for our itinerant staff to do that, so that then the pandemic coordinators at each school can reach out to you in the event there's a positive case.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Townsley. And I don't know if this is something that could be considered.
So,
is that
Linda, you were on the email that I had sent on Monday with it was the very first thing, protocols. So I think we still have two things outstanding, and then we're done. And it was the screening and awareness for 6C. And so if you have some changes to that, or you want to propose some changes to that, can we send that in Tedra's email by end of day on Friday, along with the additional, in the event that there needs to be additional supervision? I think those are the two pieces that are still outstanding here. I think everything else we have an agreement on. So in part A, number 6C, the employee screening, which Linda was talking about, I had given you the language that I had verbally proposed last week in the email from Monday. And so if you guys can get something back to me, and then I can share it with the team. And then the other piece is the additional supervision part. I think those are the only two things that we have outstanding right now. And so what Kat and Brandon had passed out to you guys, it was also emailed to you earlier today, earlier this afternoon. It is our salary proposals for the instructional schedules, the paraeducator schedules, and the ESP schedules. I know we're working within the new law for the teacher salary allocation, which is a bulk of our teacher salary raises this year. But with the para and the ESP, just so you know our thinking behind this, we know that there's a constitutional amendment on the ballot in November to bring the Florida minimum wage up to $15 an hour by 2026. And so we still have para and ESP units that are below $10 an hour. And so with polling that's been done in Florida, it looks very favorable that this amendment's going to pass, and this is something that we wanted to champion anyway, even without a constitutional amendment on the ballot. And so we wanted to this year in a multi-year plan to get all of our ESP and para units to $10 an hour. And then everybody sees a raise, and so you'll see that there's some compression that had to happen there. And that some of the years have been shortened. But what we did was every para and ESP on the new proposed scale has a 3% difference, just like it did before. And throughout the old schedule, for the most part, everybody was about at a 3% increase for experience level, with a few exceptions. Oh, sorry, I was just kind of. Yeah, I was just kind of explaining some of our thinking behind it. Oh, okay.
Hey, Linda, I wanted to tell you, thank you for your help in getting the PPEs
Oh,
funded,
you're welcome.
okay?
Althea.
I want to
Help.
put that on record, okay?
Yeah.
May I respond to Ms. Townley?
All right, so,
Everybody up to comply with the.
So in preemptively thinking that this is going to pass in November, which it seems very favorable to pass, and this is something that I know that I was thinking about even coming into this job, and so getting everybody to at least $10 an hour with preparations that this is a multi-year plan to get everybody to 15 by 2026, which would be in line with the constitutional amendment. And so so you'll see that some of the levels had to be compressed because like there were 6 levels on PG1 in the ESPs that were below $10 an hour. And so you're going to see some compression, but what we tried to do was keep in the new proposed levels that 3% level increase that was maintained in the older and the one we have now in the existing schedules. So that was our thinking behind that. We know that we have a $40 increase in the BSA, which generated about $9 million. And so out of the general fund, the total for us comes to about 4.3, and that's with the 18% calculated in for like FICA, workman's comp, all those additional things that go up when salaries go up. And so you'll see that. And then we have a separate, obviously, for the teacher salary allocation. And you can take a look at that. So what we had talked about over the summer and just some preliminary talks, we went with the banding method on how to distribute the funds as equitably as possible. And so we all know here that while the legislator did put $500 million into this statewide, the law was pretty prescriptive on how we could spend it. And it seemed to try to, to nobody here's fault, they really try to leave out veteran teachers and non-classroom teachers here. And so the way we've interpreted the law is that, if we're working to get people, and the 80% are classroom teachers, that 80% money, as long as we're working on getting them towards 47.5, we believe we are within the letter of the law here. And so what I tried to do and what we try to do as a team is with our OTPTs and our school psychs who are on a different schedule, separate from the grandfathered teacher or the performance teacher, was give them a bump that would kind of mirror the teacher salary allocation. And so there's a lot there, and it was easier for me to strike through everything that was original than try to type in those tables. And so that's why you'll see it the way it's presented, is it was easier for me and faster for me in Word to strike through the original tables and just create new tables. So that's why all the original stuff is stricken as you're looking through it. And so yeah. So if you take a look at that, I know next Wednesday is the insurance committee meeting. So I think people on both sides would be able to meet next Wednesday anyway. But looking at calendars, you have a question, Mike? Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Okay. Oh, I was just gonna look at calendars for the next time we could meet.
So I thought we already had the standing Wednesday meeting. Is that not incorrect? Is that?
What I was saying is that both sides, there's people on both sides that have to be at the insurance committee meeting next Wednesday from 3 to 5. So we can meet after 5, and I'm okay with that, but.
So let's do let's do this. So with the additions that we have or the language that we have, as I said, I'll send that to you before Wednesday, so you all can discuss it and then go from there. If you want, you can email it back to us and we can work through it that way. I think what Mike's saying, not Mike's saying, with the salaries, Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, please. Am I on?
Yep.
Okay, let's break it up into groups here. The teacher salary allocation. So I can't agree with or recommend to the board your proposal. I feel opposite, that it does not meet the letter of the intent. However, I don't think I can or anyone can solely reject it. So I believe I or Tedja will present to the board, and I'm willing to do that, but I will not recommend it. And I'll let Wes and look at it and talk about it, but I can't. And I've told you that before. I have no dog in this fight. I don't care where the money goes, but I do have to uphold what I think is the intent of the law. So that's one. I need you to, and you don't have to, I guess, do it tonight, but somehow I got to get to that 33 million on your page, because I can't, I'm not tying to it.
Which one, wait, sorry, which one are?
Cost analysis for teacher salary allocation. On the bottom middle of the page, it says total funds available for negotiations without teacher salary allocation, 33 million. Tell me how you got that.
So when Angela Dawson had done our budget analysis, when this came out in March, and the money hasn't changed since March right now. So she took everything new that you guys would be getting, and that's what she came up with. And so I can get more clarification from Angela.
Yeah, do you have, and where, I don't see where you took out the 10 million for the $60 health benefits.
So health benefits are a separate line item, so she wasn't calculating anything coming out of the general fund
That's part of our budget. That's 10 million. You know,
so I can, we could talk to her about that.
Okay, and then if you can tell me, again, you mentioned the cost to the paras. What was the para cost? 3 million.
So
right?
out of the general fund?
Yeah.
Out of the general fund for paras, well, the total is 4.36 with 18% calculated in for the ESP and para. Just the para proposed.
No. I was going to ask you so that number was both. The
4.36 million is both ESP and para, and that includes the 18%.
Okay, so 4.3 out of general.
Yes.
And again, while I can't solely reject your proposal, I will definitely not be able to recommend any increase. And I know that may sound like, well, you're not even negotiating, but in this time of where we are and what I know, so again, I'll bring it to the board. It'll be a proposal we will bring to the board. I'm not saying I won't do that. I will definitely not recommend it. I will definitely not recommend it before the end of the calendar year, because after we get cut, then we'll all know that where we are. So I don't know how we will do that in different batches, because I think you're talking about two different funding sources. We could go earlier with the teacher salary allocation as your proposal. That is in the that's set aside. It's there. There's nothing.
It's in a categorical.
So I'm okay with that. And so.
Well, and we're getting written guidance from Ron Meyer, one of our FEA attorneys, that has said that the way we're proposing this does meet the letter of the law. And so I'll get that over to you as well. That's fine. So that Wes can look at that.
I'll hash that out, but I'm just telling you, and where I am, to me, it's, some people say political suicide. It would be job or career suicide. It would be career suicide for me to recommend it. So I'm just telling you I can't do that under doing this 26 years and going through 07. The last thing I will say, and because I know I sound like I'm just like pushing back, and we're not doing this. I'm not. What I can propose are things like talking about having an in-depth conversation regarding the increase in percentage of sick leave payout. We are one of the lowest in the state. And Ms. Porteous knows, and she's already, I think, looked into where some districts go up to 90, 95, 100% after a certain number of years. And I'm willing to, because that to me is a payout time as people leave. That's doable. So I just want you to know I'm not.
And that will be a direct benefit to our employees as well. So it's something that they can see directly.
So I'm trying to be creative, but I do need to be pretty authoritative in terms of where I stand, financially in terms of what I do and that. So I'm just, I think that's all I want to, I think that's it. I just wanted to make those points and that, we'll get back to you. I'm the only thing I'm doing is costing out, and I think JD just costed it out and is within $72,000 of the 80%. So I'm good.
Okay.
Again, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't, but I'm not gonna. I can't recommend it only because that's not the way it was.
Well, and we've talked about this too, Mike, over the summer that we feel. And again, this is nobody on y'all's side. This is beyond your control. We have a governor and a state legislature that as a whole doesn't really care about public education. And you've seen it over 20 years. I mean, we're feeling it at the table right now. And so while the $500 million was nice, it should have been done all along. And then they're very prescriptive with it. And we think we found a way around because their intent, I believe, was to try to compress 10, 15 years of experience into one level and completely slap veteran teachers and non-classroom teachers in the face. I mean, they're trying to pay teachers that aren't even here yet, while you have people that have been here in the profession for 10 plus years, and they're saying, well, you don't really matter to us. And again, not you guys. This is at a state level. And
quite
so,
honestly, it slapped every single employee in the districts across the state's face. So it's not just teachers, veteran teachers.
100%. Our support staff were completely left out, and you guys as well.
The 14 million is more. The 14 million we have for that thing is more than what we gave in a raise to everybody the last time we gave a raise.
Yep.
Way more.
100%.
We could have done that all on our own. I get it, but I'm just going by the letter of the law.
And so we think our legal guidance, and Ron has said that it meets the letter of the law, and I think we should jump on this as a district, because if we can make this as equitable as possible for our employees with a law that was meant to not be equitable at all, it not only meets your strategic plan to recruit and retain, because the retain piece is a big part too. And, you can recruit with maybe a bigger base salary, but we know the numbers. They leave between 3 and 5 years. So we train them to go work for somebody else, probably not even in education. And so if we can have an opportunity to be as equitable with this salary allocation as possible, I think we as a district need to jump on that. And so, and again, I know we're talking levels above us, but we will, I'll get that written guidance from FEA, from Ron Meyer. And we've been working on this, as a statewide initiative too. And our proposal, we think, is the best way to be as equitable with everybody in that teacher unit as possible.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you heard that Tom Gonzalez is involved in any way, shape, or form with reviewing this?
No.
Okay.
No, that name's
I just
not
heard that
familiar to
through
me.
rumor mill.
I can ask. Tom Gonzalez? No. What is he? Can you give me a little background?
Tom Gonzalez has negotiated a bunch of contracts with a bunch of different districts. He's an
Okay.
He's an attorney.
Gotcha.
He used to work in Hillsborough for a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
He typically represents management.
Well, and forgive me, my novice in Excel, I'm trying to get much better at it. So if you catch anything that I maybe costed out wrong, please let me know. But I'm trying to channel my inner Angela Dawson in Excel.
I just, the 33 million and the 3.05%, I'm not following
Okay.
what, if you're saying that with this, you'll be at 3.05 or use the 3.05 to pay for the general funds?
She's just, so when she broke this down, this was just what would be available after charter was taken out. And after the teacher salary allocation was
Yeah, so my
taken out.
question,
Well, and this is including your fund balance. So this includes your fund balance.
So is Angela available?
3.05, fund balance as percent of revenue, 3.05.
Mhm.
I don't know what the 3.05 is, if that's our fund balance.
When she did this, that was what she was looking at with your fund balance.
Okay, we almost go to jail at 3.00, so that's, you know. Okay. As long as we
You go to jail. Let's be clear, you go to jail.
Superintendent.
Both of you go to jail.
No.
I'll bond you out. When can Angela be available? And I think maybe during the summer when we had those kind of small group cohort meetings to talk about this, I think maybe that is something that will be helpful for our side in terms of reviewing what she's put together, so we'll know exactly what she's talking about before we start costing out anything. I think that'll be really, really helpful. And then we can have JD and Heather there as well, so we can, so we're all on the same page, and then we can go back and forth, I think. So
I'll ask her, she's currently the only bargaining specialist for the state, and so I'll ask her when her days are, and then I'll get you guys a few days.
Okay.
If you got something on your side, like a memo, guidance, anything that you say, here is what we have, that prohibits X, Y, and Z, bring it to us, let us know so that we can go through it as well, right? We may not be aware of an interpretation or what have you that's up there, so if there's something that's prohibiting a conversation, that we should know about it so that we can then redirect and understand what we're doing. Hopefully that makes sense.
All right, guys. And I know with Wednesday being the insurance committee next week, and with Labor Day, we may need to look at the next Wednesday, or even sometime next week that's not Wednesday.
I personally like the Wednesdays that block off on my calendar, so I think it's good for all of us because we're all available at that time. What I, again, would do is provide this, if we can get Angela just to talk about this, maybe sometime next week, and then that way that will maybe earlier than later.
Okay.
So then we can have a more in-depth discussion about salaries and everything.
So then we won't meet next Wednesday because of the insurance committee.
Right.
And so then we'll meet again on the 16th.
Yep. Thank you.
3:30.
3:30?
You know, if Angela wants to set up some time with us on a conference call.
Yeah, I'll ask her. Yeah.
I had my earphones in, I picked it up.
All right, thanks, guys. Oh, yes. All right, everybody, make sure that you leave so that the recording stops on Laura's side.